Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Siren streams for the Svelte Sirens. We have with us today James Q. Quick. You may know him from the Learn, Build, Teach Discord or from Twitter or YouTube, one of the places. Do you want to give yourself a brief introduction, James?
Yeah. Yeah, you hit the big ones. We are in Learn, Build, Teach Discord together, in addition to a few other ones. But I think the general thing for me is I teach developers through content, and content takes a lot of different forms. So I'm pretty active on Twitter and Discord. I run a YouTube channel myself, have a podcast that I run with my co-host Amy Dutton, courses, all the things. And full-time job is staff developer advocate at Planetscale, which is
I
we'll get
know.
to touch on some of the Planetscale stuff today.
Absolutely. You kind of have your hands in everything. And I miss the big one, Compressed FM. I love it. I listen to it every week. So
Yeah,
yeah,
thank you.
we're so glad to have you today to talk about Planetscale and maybe some Prisma in there.
Yeah, it's a really cool integration. I think like we can talk about some of the Planetscale features, but combining it with SvelteKit, which is already amazing, and Prisma is like taking over like in the last year. Or I asked on Twitter recently, like what's the favorite technology or product that you tried out last year? And almost everyone said Prisma, which is really wild. So people are loving Prisma and it works super, super well.
Awesome. Well, I'm super excited to learn about it because I've never actually used Prisma. So I'm kind of
Nice.
excited to dive into the code. So let me switch
Yes.
over here. And I hope today goes well. I don't know if anyone can hear how windy it is at my house. And I actually had to chase a prescription that blew off of a cart down this morning. So if I have a cough or if I sound hoarse, it is because I have had a really bad morning, but we're here and we're making it and we're going to do this thing. So.
Right. One of the first live streams I did on the Planetscale channel. I guess it was post like I had COVID around that time, or maybe I did a Twitter space or something, and I like still had a cough, and I couldn't stop. Like my eyes were watering during the middle. It was so bad for me. So I am very optimistic that we will do much better than that
Oh, no, yes,
here.
we're gonna be good. All right, so let's talk a little bit. This is planetscale.com that we have here. So let's talk a little bit about this.
Yeah. So Planetscale is it's a managed MySQL database. It's built on top of a technology called Vitesse. It's not super important at a high level to know the details about Vitesse, other than the fact that like the really cool stuff that we can do inside of Planetscale comes from the unique power of Vitesse that kind of powers everything under the hood.
Okay,
So
cool.
it's a MySQL database. It's managed in here. We'll see how to create a database. There's lots of really cool features. One of the most relevant ones, I think, for developers specifically is branching. So the way you have branches in GitHub, you can create branches of your database
Oh,
and
that's super
then
cool.
do deploy requests like you would a pull request. So we may not get to actually doing that, but like you can have a production branch inside of Planetscale. And if that branch is marked as your production branch, you can't push schema changes directly to it. So you have to go through like you would with code. In this case, it's called deploy request, the equivalent of a pull request in GitHub. And that's the only way to make schema changes to your production branch. So it's like got this protection layer around it. And you can tie this into DevOps. So you can like create branches of your database based on a branch in GitHub. You can close deploy requests and create deploy requests with GitHub Actions. We've got some demos and stuff that do that. So anyway, like really cool developer features around what you would consider just your regular database type
That
thing.
seems super powerful to be able to kind of play with your data in that way where you can just branch off and not worry about messing
Hmm.
something up.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yep.
So we did go ahead and create an account before, but if you wanted to sign in, you would just click the sign in button. And I used GitHub to sign in, but this is going to redirect us straight to the page that you get right after you sign in.
Hmm.
Correct. Okay. So what do we do? What's the next step here?
So you can go ahead and you see the tiny, smaller create button. We can go ahead and create the
Yeah,
database.
where we
Yeah,
hit
or link, not
create.
button. Yep.
Okay.
And one of the cool things with Planetscale is it's serverless. So like you're not having to determine beforehand, I need 8 gigs of RAM and I need blah blah blah. Like this is just pick a region, give it a name, and you've got a database that's ready to go.
Easy to get off the
Hmm.
floor running
Yep.
really fast. Nice.
So you can call it whatever you want, something wand generator. By the way, that's what we're going to build, combining the different technologies that we mentioned. But yeah, and you'll notice also it shows you the CLI command. So we have the pscale CLI. So you can
Oh,
do
okay.
everything that we'll do from the GUI, you can do from the command line as well.
I like that it, like, gives you that kinda hint that, "Oh,
Mhm.
there's this thing that you could just use it from the line," and then here's your options for regions. I'm closest to US East, so that's the one
Yep.
that I'm gonna choose there, and we'll just go ahead and create the database.
Yep.
Looks like it's working there in the bottom corner.
And so what this will do to start is it'll create a default branch called main, and your main branch is your default branch when you start, but it's not a production branch yet. So you'll see, if we get to it at the end, that will like make some changes to the main branch and then promote that thing to the production branch, and then subsequent changes again would have to go through that deploy request process, and we may not get that far, which is totally fine.
Okay. Yeah, we'll see how far we can get with this thing. So it's initializing the
Mhm.
database right now, it looks like. Okay.
And if you want to, we can go ahead and start like a brand new SvelteKit project.
Yeah,
And
let's go ahead and do that.
what we'll do when we have that up is we'll configure Prisma inside of it. And then to connect Prisma to our database, we'll have to create a password, a connection string inside of Planetscale, and add that to the SvelteKit app.
All right. So npm init svelte at next is going to be our svelte command to create a new SvelteKit app. And then we're going to call that one generator. I'll hit enter there and yes to proceed. Obviously, it's beta software. I assume we're going to start with the skeleton project.
Yep, just your skeleton.
Okay. And maybe some TypeScript or.
I would do it. Yeah. When I was working on
Oh,
this the other day, I did TypeScript, and
nice.
I've I want to force myself to do more and learn more along the way with
I know,
TypeScript.
and a lot of these demos, we don't use it because we're
Mhm.
afraid that we're gonna mess something up, so I
Yeah,
like that. Awesome. So ESLint and Prettier, what about those 2?
I usually do those. Yeah,
Okay.
and then going back to the TypeScript thing. Oh, I had a point. Now I've completely forgotten. Oh, I was wondering for people that are hanging out with us, I've debated about this in Quick Start documentation for Planetscale specifically, but in general, if you're doing a JavaScript quick start, would you prefer to do it in like regular JavaScript or TypeScript? And so the balance is like JavaScript is what more people know, although there's benefits of like type safety and best practices and things that comes with TypeScript. And then people debate about, is it easier to go from TypeScript to do regular JavaScript or vice versa? So I'm kind of curious if anybody has any opinion. If you were doing a quick start, would you rather see like regular JavaScript, or would you rather see it with TypeScript?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would be interested to hear that as well because I don't know, I'm very new to TypeScript, so I see the benefits of it, but it makes the code more complicated to read.
Hmm.
So when you're learning something new, I feel like it adds complexity,
Hmm.
but I would be interested to hear what the audience thinks on that one too. So I've got our dev server up and running. I ran npm install to get all of our packages installed, and just this is our bare bones skeleton project in SvelteKit.
Cool.
I'm going to go ahead
Perfect.
and close the terminal there, and we've just got our routes folder. So this is the index.svelte file we're seeing there. Oh, and we'll go ahead and reload that since it's mad at me about plugins, and it's still mad.
And
Okay.
again, yeah, whatever. um, oh, they're saying Prince Wilson's saying love the idea of both. Yeah,
Yeah.
I got really mixed results when I asked that question on Twitter. Um,
I think you probably will because TypeScript, you either love it or you hate it.
yeah. Or you're intimidated by it, to be honest. Like you said, it adds a lot of extra stuff to the code. There are benefits that come with it, but for people who have not seen it before, it's very intimidating for that to be the first thing that you see, I think.
Absolutely. Ben is saying here he's getting flashbacks. I was on some antics last week and we just noped out. We were like, nope, not going to add that complexity.
So yeah, we're taking a big leap here. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So let's dive into some code here. So, what's the first thing
Yeah.
that we're going to do to get this integrated?
Yeah, so we'll go ahead and set up Prisma. So the first thing to do
Okay.
is to run the install of Prisma. So it's a developer dependency, or
Oh,
the
okay.
dev dependency, and you get the right idea. I'm going to copy this in the chat for people if they're looking for the reference. But we've got the Prisma quick start documentation on the Planetscale site that you can look at. But it's npm i-d, yep. And then this will just be Prisma to start. So Prisma.
Okay.
And for people, I know we've got a Prisma employee here. If you want to add any additional context in the chat, feel free. But Prisma is an ORM. ORM stands for Object Relational Mapping, I believe. And it's basically an abstraction layer on top of a database. So in the MySQL database world, you give it commands with SQL. That's how you do your CRUD operations with a MySQL database, along with many other types of databases. But writing raw SQL, especially in code, can be very error prone. It's tough. There's like, you have to get the case right and you have to terminate with semicolons and like all these very specific things, which is not super natural for just kind of us regular JavaScript developers. So Prisma in this case is a JavaScript ORM, which allows us to interact with our database with a JavaScript API where we're working with objects in JavaScript and we have functions to call instead of having to write raw queries ourselves.
That makes sense.
Very common thing. I've like taught a boot camp and taught a section on SQL, and I have to tell them like, this is cool for you to learn. Most of the time you're going to use an ORM of some sort. Like it may not be Prisma if you're in a different language or framework than something JavaScript related, but most of the time you're going to have an ORM that you end up working with.
Do we need to do anything on the actual Prisma site?
Nope. So we'll just use, in a second here, we will use their client library, and that's how we'll do our interactions. But there's nothing that we need here to be able to set that up. I believe there's an integration with Planetscale where you can do, I need to actually check this because I haven't used it, but there's an integration like in the browser there that you can do with Planetscale, but we can just set this up ourselves.
All right. I posted both of those links just in case anyone wants to check out those docs and the Prisma site. So they have access to that. All right. So we're fully in the code now. We don't need anything in the browser.
Yeah, we'll go back to the Planetscale dashboard in a second, but yeah, for now we're good.
All right.
So we have the Prisma package installed. You'll need to kill that. Sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
And run npx prisma init. So this will take that Prisma package that we just created, and you'll see it's going to add a couple of files here first in a second. So run that command, and then we should see in the right-hand side in your folder, in your Explorer, you'll see there's a Prisma directory. Inside of there's the schema.prisma. And so what this is, the lines that you see in 4 through 8 or so are the configuration properties for this Prisma thing that we're working with. And there's a couple of important parts. We'll need to make a few changes. One thing to recognize that we'll go and set up here in a second is on line 10, you've got the URL, and it's looking for an environment variable called database URL. So we'll need to go and create that connection string here in a second, and then add that into a .env file so that this thing can read that and make its connection to the database.
That makes sense.
The other part of this, there's one specific thing when integrating Planetscale and Prisma that we have to do. Planetscale does not support foreign key constraints. That often gets confused with not supporting foreign keys, which is not the case. Foreign key constraints means if you have a relationship between two different items, there could be a constraint to say, I can't delete this item if it still is referencing this other item that still exists, or I can't delete this item if another item is referencing me. So instead of, basically what we'll do is update a couple of properties here to say, hey, Prisma, you can take care of that stuff because the database layer is not going to take care of that.
You have to like give it permission.
Kind of. It's not a permission per se, but just, hey, I want you to do this for me because the database won't. The other aspect of that that's important is it's not a lack of feature set on the Planetscale part. It's the features and things and the powerful stuff that comes with Vitesse underneath the hood. It was a specific decision to get rid of or not support foreign key constraints to enable some of these other really cool things that we do. So it's a informed decision that we think the benefits outweigh the lack of foreign key constraints, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay.
So inside of your generator client, underneath the provider line, so if you create a new line on line 6, you can say preview features, and this will be camel case equals, and then an array with one string, and it's going to be referential integrity. And if you want to, you could you could kind of copy this from
Referential. What was the second?
integrity.
And is it camel case too?
Yep.
Integrity.
Yep.
Is that correct?
Yes. I think those
Spelled it right? Are you kidding?
I think so. Everybody in the chat, double check us too. I think you might, because this is not a JavaScript file, I think you have to use double quotes.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Because it's not quite exactly a JavaScript file in itself.
Okay.
The other thing you should do, you don't have to do it right now, but it is actually, you should do it right now, is install the extension for Prisma inside of VS Code. And you'll see, once we do that, you'll have like color highlighting and IntelliSense inside of where you are.
Yeah, it's actually sitting there recommending it for me as the first one. Nice.
Now,
we might have to reload the. Oh nope, didn't even have to reload.
Yeah, love it.
Perfect.
Yashi is saying, by the way, love the conversation. Start from scratch. Cool. Yeah, if you have any questions, let me know. I'd be happy to talk about anything and everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. So we've got the preview features. We're saying we want to use referential integrity. And then in the database DB portion, if you add one more line there, so this will, then you can say referential integrity. I know, right?
I have to enunciate it to be able to spell it.
Absolutely. And you can set that to a string with Prisma inside of it. So this is saying we're going to let Prisma take care of the referential integrity for us.
Oh, I don't know what Prettier just did, but
so this is with that extension, it knows how to format these files where it's going to align the equals so that the stuff on the other side of the equals, and you see this in like config files sometimes as well. Anyway, so yeah.
Oh, interesting. So the extension that we just installed took care of that. Was that done with Prettier, or was that just a part of the extension?
I would imagine that the extension lets it then interact with Prettier, and Prettier does it, but I'm not sure, to be honest.
Interesting.
Austin mentioned that he was about to plug the extension, so if you have any details on how that integrates with the formatting, I know it does it for you, and it does it really, really well.
It does kind of make it easier. It looks funny on the left side, but it makes it easier to just align your eyes to
align the stuff on the right.
Yeah.
All right. So on 10, the other thing we'll need to do, it comes by default to set up with Postgres. So we'll just do MySQL here. So you can just replace Postgres with MySQL.
And that's MySQL. There we go.
Yep. Cool. So the other thing we'll do in here, so those two parts are kind of configuration for how Prisma is going to interact with the database. The other thing we want is the actual data model. So if you go down after line 13, 14, so we'll actually create a database model here using the Prisma syntax.
Okay.
We could do this one of two ways. You could go and copy this from the source code if you wanted to speed it up a little bit, or I could just walk you through it.
So is that the model?
Yep.
Okay. All right.
Cool. So if people who are familiar with SQL will kind of realize there's some similarities here. We have the names of the columns as the left name. So ID created at, updated at core, would, and length. And then there's the types of those as well. And people will realize these are a little bit different than some of the specific naming conventions that you'll see for column types in MySQL. Again, this is an abstraction layer for Prisma because it's going to interact with lots of different potential types of column names across different types of databases. The first thing is the ID. It's a auto incremented ID, so it'll start at 1, and then every one that you create after that will be 2, 3, 4, 5. The created at has a default of now. So this means every time you create one of these objects, Prisma is going to go ahead and add the, actually, I guess the database would do that for us. It's going to translate to tell the database to take the current timestamp of when you create it. And updated at is Prisma's annotation to say, hey, every time we update this thing, update that property with the current timestamp at that point. And then we have strings and a decimal for the length.
Okay. And here I see you are giving those strings. Is this like bytes or how big of a string? That's an interesting.
This is something I've actually been like looking much more into about how this data actually gets stored. So those Those would be characters. A character, for the most part, would be 1 byte, although you have some characters, depending on your character encoding, that are multiple bytes. So this is saying 50, and I couldn't tell you right offhand what the default character set and encoding are, but this is saying this would be 50 characters long. And since we have a relatively good idea of like what the max number of characters are, because we'll provide the different types of cores and woods, it's pretty safe to assume that they'll be under 50 characters.
That is one of the things that's hard for me doing, like, databases and some, like, back-end stuff where you have to specify, like,
Mhm.
how much you need is like,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yep. And there's obviously like the smaller you can make that number, because you know what your data set looks like, the better,
Yeah,
because that's less space that it takes up and it's less space that it has to traverse.
very true.
But that, like, there's only so much of that you can do, to your point, because you
Fine
don't
line.
necessarily know what each one of your properties is going to look like.
Yeah. Alright. So that's our
Cool.
model for the
Yes.
wand. We've got the Prisma stuff set up now.
Yep.
What's our next step?
We can now actually push this. Oh, sorry. The other thing we need to do is back in. I was going to say push this schema to our database, but first we need to get the connection string.
Okay.
I assume this is something that you'll delete after, so you can show the password now and delete it right after, or you
Okay.
could hide your screen and create it. It's up to you.
Okay.
So if you click on your branches
Are
tab,
are you able to, change the password after? So I could leave it connected and up so people could see it, or is that not possible?
you would delete slash create a new one. So
Okay.
it's after you create it, you won't actually be able to see it again for security purposes. And different companies,
Well,
different products
anyone
have
could
different
go in and, like,
implementations.
follow these steps to, like, create the same thing, so it
Yes.
would be fine if we just
Yep.
delete it after.
Absolutely. Yep.
Alright.
So click on your main branch there, and
Sorry, I can
then
make this bigger.
yeah, and then in the right side there's connect and generate password. You can see the command line command there. And then if
Yep.
you hit the drop down that says general,
General
there's one of these for Prisma.
Prisma.
And that whole thing, like, you could copy that whole thing.
But really, we
Notice,
just need this
yeah,
URL.
yep. And if you were building out that Prisma schema file from scratch, this would be helpful because you could just copy that whole thing. But since it's already got most of that for you,
And so this is the environment variable that we need to set up, right?
yes. So if you go into your .env file,
Which don't think we have one.
there is one there by default. Yeah.
Oh.
So what happens? This is a good point.
Oh, Prisma did it. I was
Prisma,
like, I didn't think
yeah,
SvelteKit
yep.
did that.
Yep, Prisma goes ahead and gives it for us, and then you can just
Nice.
replace the database URL. And now I think you've got a
Oh,
double
I've got
quote at
2
the,
quotes there. Paste, and I must have grabbed the extra.
yeah, I think that should
Okay.
be right. So, cool. So now Prisma has everything it needs to be able to connect to our database. So if you have that saved, then you can run npx Prisma db migrate. Make sure that's the right, or excuse me, npx Prisma db push. So space db
E
and then space push.
space push. Okay.
And the
Let
difference
everyone see
here
that.
is the migrates, like Prisma keeps track of migrations for you. So as you make schema changes, it's going to keep a track of that history. Since in Planetscale we have this idea of branching and kind of version history kind of built into that, we don't need both to be doing that. So in this case, we're just pushing this schema to Planetscale. We don't need Prisma to keep track of the migration history.
Okay. And it looks like it took care of, like, loading the environment variables for us. It loaded into Prisma, the schema, and then it figured out the database, the type and the name of the database, and then gave us the location?
Yep. Yep. So that's everything it needed to be able to actually talk to the database.
Awesome.
And just to show that it actually worked, if you go back to the Planetscale dashboard, there's a schema tab that you can click on that you may need to refresh.
And look at that.
So
It's got a
there's,
table with wand there.
yep. So that stuff is now connected. You can actually go into the console as well, and inside of the console, you can run queries. So if you do like a select star from wand, it won't have any records because we don't have any, but it'll be
Lowercase
there.
one,
It'll match the table name,
which I think was
which is
uppercase.
uppercase. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
And then how do you run it?
And this is one bit of feedback that that I have given to you. You have to terminate it with a semicolon. So if you backspace and then add the semicolon on the end, then it will run.
Nice.
Yep. So nothing in there now. We could add a record if we wanted to. Maybe this would be. Let's actually do this. Let's do. Do I have the link to the studio in here? If you go back to your VS Code portion.
Whoops.
And run MPX Prisma Studio. I don't use this all that often, but it's pretty cool.
I don't know why VS Code does this sometimes, where it just jumps to the next line when you're typing, but I didn't type that on the other line. All right, so Prisma Studio started at
5555.
I use Firefox by default, and it always opens up in the wrong browser for me. So there we go.
Gotcha. Yep. So you can click on that wand model, and what the studio gives us is like a visual editor for our database. So if you want to make that bigger, we can go ahead and create one row so that we have a test.
Yeah, let me. So create a row. Is that a record?
Yep. And you can leave those first three alone. They take care of themselves. And then the core, you could do Phoenix, which is Harry Potter's core. Phoenix feather, if we wanted to add it. Yeah. The wood is holly. Yeah, you could just leave it as Phoenix. It's just test data.
I love that you know all of these.
I used to know this, but I've forgotten now. I can't remember how long his
9 3/4. I'm gonna say that. No, that's the platform.
That's the platform. Yeah. I'm not exactly sure what it is. If anybody knows on the chat, feel free. Just try 11 for 11. Now.
That might be right.
And
we don't need units or anything on these, right?
Need what?
Units.
Nope. Yeah, we don't need any units. And I don't know exactly how. I guess Prisma is just kind of saving this stuff in memory until you actually click the save one change. So now you can save this record by doing that, and then it shows that your record is in there. So the next thing we can do is actually query that stuff from inside of a SvelteKit application.
Sounds good.
So what I did, if you want to create an API endpoint for, and we can just call it wands.
Okay. Everyone kind of does this differently. So are we using the API folder? Are we using a file based off index, or how are we doing this?
I did an API folder.
Okay.
So
I feel like coming from Next, a lot of people are used to this convention.
Yeah.
So
Yep. Agreed.
So an API folder, and then we're just going to create. Do you just want an index.ts file?
I named mine wands.ts, so that way it would be.
That makes sense.
It would be specific in the path.
Awesome. Okay, so we have a new file there.
Scary. So we have that file. To be able to work with Prisma now inside of our client, we need to install the Prisma client library. So you can actually kill the Prisma Studio if you want to. It's a cool thing to demo, so people can use that in the future, but we don't need it anymore, I don't think.
Okay.
And then we'll want to install it's at Prisma/client. So it's npm installed. It's not a dev dependency. So
okay, it has to be a
So the regular Prisma is stuff we're just using for like setup and in our development space, obviously. And then this one is just a regular one. Yes.
Okay.
Should be right.
All right, we can see that got added under our regular dependencies.
Sweet. Now we should be able to use it. Let me pull up my sample code. So if you want to, in that API endpoint, do you want to define a get, an async get function?
Okay. let's see. How do we do that? Is it const? I'm so bad with endpoints.
I totally understand. So and I will need to export it, which I think is
Oh,
required
yeah.
by
Okay. So export
export,
async
and then
function. And what did you
do
say? It's a
we?
get function. And
Yep,
then,
you got it. And the
okay.
other way to do it is as a arrow function. So you could do export const get equals async, but this is totally
Okay.
fine
Yep.
too. I actually in my demo they're mixed because I created my get endpoint from someone else's thing that I just copied over and didn't change it to the arrow syntax. But
This
yeah.
is the stuff that, like, I go away from backend development from because I can never remember, like, which way
Mm,
the syntax goes with that
yeah.
kinda stuff. I'm just like, I need to visually see it to
Hmm.
do it.
Well, it's also confused like Netlify functions, Vercel API endpoints, SvelteKit API endpoints. Like all of them are slightly different. So
Yeah.
you never know exactly what they look like in any given platform.
Yeah. I feel like it's not JavaScript, but even though it is JavaScript. But you said we needed to import the Prisma client, right?
We will, yeah. So you can import. It's a named import, so you'll put it inside of brackets, and it's Prisma client, uppercase for the first. Yeah, it's got
Oh, it
nice,
automatically
nice,
did that. I love it.
love it. And then if you go down to a new line, now we can initialize the Prisma client by just calling new Prisma client. So const Prisma equals
Oh,
new
okay.
Prisma client.
And that's a function?
Hmm.
Is it a function?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So that should give us the Prisma thing that we can work with. And now kind of the fun begins, or at least you'll start to see the benefit of Prisma. So if you, on that line number 5, if you type in Prisma and then do dot, it will populate. If you look at that variable all the way at the bottom, it will
Yeah.
populate with the different tables that we have. In this case, we only have one. So we want to work with the one table and then do dot again. And you'll see here all the different functions that you can call. Now, this is like much more obvious for JavaScript developers than like a raw SQL statement would be. So this
Uh-huh.
is where we're getting to interact with JavaScript instead of writing SQL ourselves.
It's more like that object
Hmm.
that you were talking
Yeah,
about. So,
exactly.
yeah, that's awesome, and it populates all of that, so it gives you
Hmm.
that IntelliSense. Is that the Prisma extension that's doing all of this?
It so there when the I forget exactly how this works. The Prisma client, if you change your data model behind the scenes, your Prisma client needs to be regenerated and it actually
Mhm.
creates, I think, types. So if you were to look, I don't think you need to, but if you were to look in the node modules directory under Prisma, you would see that it has like type definitions for the different models that we have. So
Oh,
it's
okay.
using those types definitions to now be able to provide IntelliSense
Nice. That's
inside
really
of VS
awesome.
Code. Yeah,
Okay.
and you could guess what to do, but find many is the one almost right in the middle, and you can call it. I don't know if you have to pass the empty object. You may be able to pass nothing. I passed an empty configuration object.
Okay. So,
Inside of the config, you could do like a where clause, like find wands where the core is holly or something like that.
so you could do that here?
You could. I don't have the syntax
Okay.
with me right this second, but it would be. Well, let me look it up
Is it
really
like
quick.
in backticks or
It's no, there'll be key value pairs inside of that
Oh, okay.
object. So Prisma where let me just make sure I get the
Oh,
syntax
look at
correct.
that. It populated that.
Yeah,
Where
there you go. And
and
then
then
if you do an object inside of so where would be an object, and then if you return, now you can say that it ends with or so if you type ends with, do you get IntelliSense there? Oh,
yeah,
sorry,
it's
I messed up. My bad. This is the property that we want to search by. So if you say core,
core. Oh,
mhm,
yep,
so that's
populated
one of
that.
the columns, and then if that becomes an object, and then now you could do something like ends with. Yeah.
Okay.
So if you wanted to say, hey, I want to get a core that ends with feather or something like that, like you could do all kinds of whatever kind of query basically that you could do.
Like that?
Hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
So we could
Um,
find them by doing that,
mhm.
but for now, we probably just want that empty object, so maybe I
Yeah.
could just comment that out.
Yep. Yeah. So the other thing, two things we'll want to do is, well, this is an async function, so we'll want to await the response, and then we can assign it to a wands variable. So const wands equals await, and then what you have. Forsaken is asking about case sensitivity. Depending on where you're asking about case sensitivity, if you're looking at ends with specifically, I would imagine that that is case sensitive, although I would have to check the official docs to be 100% sure of that.
And this, since it's an endpoint, I assume we need to return like status code and body and stuff
Yep,
like normal endpoint stuff.
exactly. Yeah,
All right.
so we can just assume it's gonna work and not like we won't have to worry about handling
Like
errors and stuff.
checking here if
Yeah,
it's a try catch block. So
yeah.
200
200, and
and
then yeah, go ahead.
body is an object. And then we're going to get, how are we going to get it off the body?
I like to return an object, whether it's successful or not for the body, so that I could, if something went wrong, I could attach a specific message. In this case, nothing has gone wrong, so we can just return a data property inside of the body that is the wands.
Okay. So, and then we're returning this wand up here.
Mhm.
All right.
So hopefully, if we've done things right,
Run our server now.
yep, and then make sure you save that file. Yep,
Save that.
and then
And
if
then in
you
index.
and you could, well, I was going to say you could just check it in the browser too.
Oh, okay.
So if you just go to, it'll be 3000/API/wands, then hopefully we'll just at least see that that data is coming back. API first. So
Oh, I
since
have
it's
to
in
do
the
API.
file,
Yep.
yeah. Austin is saying that ends with defaults to case sensitive, but you could pass a case insensitive option. It varies by DB. And again, that's one of the benefits of working with an ORM. They have to deal with all the differences between the databases. You just have to work with Prisma, which is pretty nice.
I don't have the pretty JSON formatter, but there is some JSON data being returned. So it's working. We can see that it's working.
Yeah. Do we want to create the post equivalent to that? So if someone is creating a wand, we can go ahead and create that endpoint.
Sure. Do we do that in the same wands.ts file, or do we do it in a separate?
In the same wands, and this is actually something I really like. So if you look inside of Next, you have to define your handler, and then based on the incoming request, determine if it's a get or a post inside of that function. So you have these case switches. I didn't know this until the other day when I was experimenting with this, but you can define your different functions here inside of the same file. And they will handle, like this one now will handle a request sent to /API/wands, but it's a post instead of a get, which makes it like so much cleaner in my mind.
Interesting. So we do this the same way. We just say post instead of get, right?
Yep.
All right.
And SvelteKit knows, based on that function name, that it's going to handle post requests.
Depending on which one you're doing. So if you're going to API/wands, you're doing a get request. How does it know when to do that post?
Based on the HTTP method. So each request,
Nice.
like in your browser, that's just making a GET request by default. If you, and we can test this, I don't know if we don't have to, but I don't know if you have Postman handy, but you could send a post request and Postman and test this if we want to.
I do have Postman. I don't know where it's at.
If you find it, then we can test it out. There's also the Thunder client extension inside of VS Code that can do
Oh,
the same
maybe
thing.
I don't have it installed. Interesting. I never do stuff like this. What was it called? Thunder something?
Thunder client. Yeah,
Oh,
actually, it showed up. So this is
when you type in
something.
Postman, it shows up.
It's
That's like good
basically,
SEO.
yeah, it's basically a Postman clone as an extension inside of VS Code. So the video I did on this is one of my most popular videos ever. So I claim some amount of credit that that really high number of downloads that they have came from my video.
Awesome. Yeah, that's fantastic. It was also
Someone,
voted number 10 product of the day on Product 10, apparently.
yeah, it's done really well. Someone else mentioned the REST client extension. That's another one that people like to use inside.
Awesome. So it looks like it just pops up in your activity bar here.
Yep. And we'll come back to, so we'll finish out the endpoint and then we'll come back to actually testing it. So the first thing, like on line 22, we'll need to get the post body. So as people create a wand on the front end, they're going to send this information to the back end, and so we'll need to parse that information. So we can say const body equals, and we'll do an await, and in your post definition, give it a parameter of event.
Is it in curlies?
Nope, just regular
Event.
without.
Okay.
Yeah. And then you can do event.request.json, and JSON is a function, so you'll close it with parentheses. Yeah. So this actually took some. We were messing around with this the other day to try to figure out exactly how to get that body data. Anyway, but that's how you'd get it, and then we can take that body and send it to our database. So one more call on 23. You can say await, and then like we did earlier, Prisma .wand .create.
I'm sorry, all these IntelliSense things are popping up, and it's like kind of hard to see.
Yeah.
Is that a function too?
It's a function.
Okay.
And then inside of create, we'll pass an object, and it will have one property, which is data. And that data will use the body that we just got.
Okay. So we're not going to return the body here. I was trying to get ahead of it and did not. How are we going to return that now?
So we could do two things. What I have in my demo is just like an object that has a message property that says created successfully. So if you did body first, because that's what
and then an object,
yeah,
and then a message.
Yep. And then just the string created successfully.
Created successfully.
I think if you look at like RESTful routing formally, what you would do is return the object that was created. So if we assigned the prisma.wand.create to a variable, then we could return it back in a data property if you wanted to.
So you could do that as a
new wand or created wand or whatever.
Wand. Yeah. Created wand. And then here as the data, you could do created wand.
Yep, exactly.
There we go.
Yep. So you can save that, and then we can try this out. By the way, it's a stop at the hour? Is that right?
We can try to finish up if we have a few things left.
Okay. It's either way is good, and we can some of the front end stuff we can copy in and kind of talk through it really quick. Just show
absolutely.
How we get it.
We'll see how far we get into that.
Yeah. So open back up your Thunder client tab and do a new request.
All right.
And update that to be the localhost 3000/API wands.
Here?
Yep. So you can get rid of the whole thing because we won't have HTTPS.
Oh, I don't know why there we go. Localhost 3000/API/wands.
Yep. And just to the left of that, you'll see a drop down that says get. So actually go ahead and run that. This will, if you run it as a get, it will do the exact same thing that the browser would.
That we've got right here.
Yep. And now go ahead and swap that to be a post.
Okay.
And now we want to attach the body information that we want to send along. So go into the body tab. And then I just do raw JSON. So if you open up a JSON object, and now you can do the property. So you can make up whatever you want, but core, give it a random name. Core can be Planetscale heart. I don't know. We'll just make up stuff. Sweet.
All right.
And then you can do the wood. What's a wood near? What's a oak tree near you? Oak sounds good. And then you can do a length as just the number 12 or something.
There we go. That way we've got some different data. I hit Control say S and it just saved that. Like.
Oh, it saved it as.
Yeah, there was just habit. Like when I'm done with something, I hit Control S, and I'm
Yep.
on Windows. Sorry, Command S, Control S, whichever you use. But
I'm the same. I also have, when I'm in the terminal, anytime I do an ls command or anytime I do a cd command, I immediately do an ls to make sure I'm looking at the files that I think I should be.
That's a good tip.
So you should go ahead and give that a try. Send that request. Yeah.
And
And
created successfully is our
cool.
message, and we got our data back. Awesome.
And if you look, so on the right-hand side of VS Code, you see you can click on the previous GET request. If you click on that and then send that again, we should see that there's 2 wands.
Very nice.
Cool. So all that stuff is connected. We have the endpoints to read the wands and then to create the wands. And then the other part of this is to do some stuff on the front end to be able to actually generate the wand.
Awesome. So we want to go over to the front end, like the index.spelt file now.
Yep.
Okay. Can I close these tabs out?
Yes.
Okay. Go ahead and do that. I'm going to close out the environment variable in that schema. So we've got less going on up here. So here is our stuff. If we went back to localhost 3000, this is what we're seeing here in our spelt file.
Yep. So we can clear that out completely. And for what it's worth, I don't have a good looking version of this yet. My goal is to like style this and make this a really good looking thing. Now it's just got kind of basic functionality. So
all right. Well, I mean, that's all we're looking for is to make sure we have something functioning. So we can make it pretty later.
That's right. So let's see. So you can open up a script tag. So we'll do actually and list it as the lang equals ts. So inside of the initial script tag.
So we need to tell Svelte that we're using TypeScript here.
Right. And we'll have a couple of different properties, basically one property for each one of those columns that we just had. So core, wood, and length. I ended up adding like maker and flexibility.
Let those.
Yep.
And then did you put any values on these?
I did not, but I did do one TypeScripty thing where you can define, because we're not initializing it to a value, we don't yet know what type of data that is. So you can do a colon and then a string for the first 2 and then a number for length.
So is that like lowercase string? Just like that? And then this one is a number.
Right. So this is our way of telling, of specifically defining this variable is going to be this type of data. And if you were like, for people that are newer to TypeScript, if you went down to line 5 or 6 and you tried to set core to a number, so if you said core equals 6 or something, you'll see that it'll give you an error if you want to.
It will give you a visual error about that.
Yep.
Awesome. That's cool. And are these just regular variables to use in this file? Or if we wanted to create another route, are these properties that like we would export, or are they just
just use them in here. What I did in the like my demo is create a separate component for the wand form. It actually should be like wand generator thing, because I originally had it as a form where you fill in inputs and submit, but this time it's just going to kind of generate it for you. So we could split things out into separate components, but for now we can just dump it all and then
that way we can get through this and have something visual. That way we'll see.
Yep.
All right.
One other property, sorry, to do is a generating property, or like is generating. This would just be a Boolean to tell us whether or not like we're currently, like if it's generating a wand, we don't want to let someone try to generate another wand, if that makes sense.
Okay. Cool. And none of these have values set to them, so they're all just like initialized variables.
Yep. Okay. So the one other thing we'll want is if you want to create like a globals.ts file in your source. So in your source directory, create globals.ts. And I would just go and copy this from the source code. So this is just a couple of different arrays of all the different options for those properties, including a few extra that we're not even using.
Oh yeah, that's a lot of stuff.
Yeah, we can just copy that in and be done with it.
Paste and see what we've got in here. So we've got the woods that you can use. We've got some cores that you can use and some makers. What are makers?
Like the wand maker, like who made the wand.
Who made the wand. Okay. And flexibilities.
Yep. And we're not using maker and flexibility right now. But that's the plan in the final demo.
Okay. Sounds good. So this is just initialized data.
Just data. Yep.
Yep. Okay.
So now if you start to type, if you just start typing cores.
In the markup or in the...
Probably anywhere, but do it in the TypeScript part. So if you do a new line and type in cores.
Yeah, it's kind of auto-populating?
It should grab it. Go back one, like delete E. There it is. So keep going forward, CORE, and then go down one. That should give you an auto import. So if you try that and scroll up to the top.
Oh, there we go. I was like, where did it go?
The only thing when the auto import happens, it doesn't actually recognize source as a root directory, like as a that would be looking at source relative to the current directory. So we need to do // in there. So this is saying go back one directory. Oh, actually, sorry. And then delete source. So going back one directory puts us into the source
Oh,
directory.
okay. I see. Yep.
And then
I see
global
what
CI.
we're doing.
Yep.
And you could also probably set up an alias for this in SvelteKit.
Yep. Absolutely.
Awesome.
Yeah, we have that set up, which I haven't plugged yet, but the Everything Svelte course that Amy and I are working on, we have aliases set up there. Yeah.
Very excited for that.
Me too. So you can import cores and then also import woods up there as well.
Okay.
So I think we're probably at the point where we'll copy a lot of the rest of this and talk about it, but let's do one thing really quickly. Create a generate wand command, function, not command.
Okay, so function generate wand like that?
Yep. And the way we'll do this, we actually won't use this function specifically in a second because I changed this in the end, but I just wanted to give people an idea of how this works. So to generate a wand, what we need to do is get a random wood, a random core, and then a random length. So we can just do a couple of these for example purposes. So if you say wood equals, and then this will be kind of a long string, but let's start with the random number part. So if you type math.random, and random is a function, so it'll close with parentheses. So math.random will give you a decimal number between 0 and 1, not including 1, but including 0, I believe. So the way we kind of convert that to a number that's in the range of the indexes that we're looking for is we multiply that by the length of the array that we're looking in. So you would multiply this by woods.length.
Woods.length.
And then that,
GTH.
Yep, that will length is a property, not a function. So it'll, so the only issue with this that we're missing is this will give us an index that is a decimal. So it could be 5 dot something. So to get rid of that, we floor the whole thing. So before math.random,
math.floor, and we wrap all of that inside of that, right?
And that thing will give us the index that we're looking for, but we want to use that index to grab the appropriate wood out of. So you could say woods and then
an array. Is that correct?
Woods. So we're looking at the original array. Yeah.
Whoops.
The woosed.
All right. So we have the array of woods, and we are getting an index by doing math.random times the woods.length, and we're flooring that to get an even value.
Yep.
It's complicated, but we got it.
Yeah. So this is just us grabbing a random wood from that array. And if you want to copy and paste that line, you could do the same thing for cores. So it'd be core equals and then cores.
Cores, and this is going to be cores. I could have done that a little easier, and then we need a random length.
Yep, and it will be similar. So you can copy that whole thing one more time for
the whole thing.
Actually, no, don't copy it. Sorry, it'll be a little bit different. So say length equals, and we're gonna want to get a number between 10 and 20 that could be not just integers, but also decimals by a quarter increment. So we're saying between 10 and 20, it could be 10.25, 10.5, 10.75, 11, and so on up until 20.
They told me I wouldn't have to do math.
We'll get through it. So do another math.random.
Okay.
And I calculated that between 10 and 20, there are 40 increments of 0.25. So if it's 10 numbers, 4 per each gives you 40. So we can do math.random times 40.
Times 40.
And then we will floor that whole thing to make sure we get an integer. And then
Okay.
we want to multiply that by 0.25 and then add 10 to it.
Does it need parentheses? I'm trying to
It
do
should be okay that way.
what's the, there's an acronym for this, like, how you
Oh,
do
the
math.
PEMDAS?
Yeah.
Yeah, parentheses, exponents,
Yeah, like, which one you do first.
parentheses, exponents, multiply, divide, add,
Multiplication.
subtract. Yeah.
Ah,
Yeah.
there we
Fun
go.
times. You didn't know you
I
signed up
just
for
brought
math
you
class
back
on this
to,
one.
like,
I
middle
know.
school.
That's right. Okay, cool. So this, in theory, this is just kind of how we would get generate our a random wand created. So let's do a couple more things, and then we'll just copy and paste the final stuff to show how it gets transformed a little bit to use like the transitions in Svelte, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
But just do inside of your markup now, do a p tag for each one of those properties. So you could say like p tag and then wood colon and then the wood itself.
Oh, yeah.
So you could do
Okay.
just a label
I'm
before it.
gonna
Yeah.
copy this. Oops. And then do wood, and this one's gonna be core. Oh, and links. When you try to move fast, things just don't
Yeah,
work for you.
that's right.
Okay.
All right. So then add a button
Fine.
called generate that will call the generate one function. And also Ollie from chat mentioned earlier that those variables would be undefined by default, which is absolutely true. And we can
Mhm.
see that now.
Click, and we want to call our generate wand. And what are we going to pass that?
Don't need to pass it anything. And I
Okay.
think in this case, we don't call it yet. I think it's just naming the
It's
function that
just
will be
grabbing all
called.
of that data from those global files. Awesome.
Mhm. And we don't. So the get rid of the parentheses after generate one because we're not like if you add the
Okay.
parentheses, it's calling it right then, as opposed to saying this is the function we're going to call when the click event happens.
Okay. That
Yeah.
makes sense.
And those
Mm,
syntaxes change everywhere. So it's like you kind of have to test to see which one is which. So give that a try. Click the button there, and we
That
get a
was
random one.
magical.
Yeah. So it gets. I think it gets cooler, especially when I add the actual like look of everything. Do you want to copy? So inside of the source code, there's the
Oh,
wand form
we're just gonna
function.
do that.
We'll need to get rid of some of the stuff that's in there, but um, do
Okay.
you want to copy and paste that whole component and just dump it into the index?
All of it?
So, yep. So this is just the basics of how we're generating this wand, and then there's lots of stuff that I did
Do I
to
need
have it
to
be like animated.
save any of this code that I've already got?
It'll be replaced by the new stuff, so I think you can just get rid of all of
Is
it.
that over
Yeah.
there? Okay. So
Yep.
we've got styles down here in a style block. We've got some markup similar to what we had, handle generate and handle submit. Got some more markup with some if blocks saying if these things do this thing. And then we've got our script tag up here where all of our JavaScript is. So that
hmm
generate wand function is here now.
Yep. And
And
I ended up not using it after a little while because I had to do some tricky stuff to get these animations or the transitions to work. By the
I
way,
want to
one
answer this one question. They
that's
have
what I
to
was
go
going to do
for,
too.
yep.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
This is actually not just for demo purposes. This is the beauty of something like SvelteKit or Next or other hybrid frameworks that allow you to do both front end code and server side code. So we're not actually accessing the database from the front end web app directly. We actually don't have any code in here yet. But what we'll do, if you scroll open or scroll up to the submit function, the handle submit. So if you look inside of this handle submit, that would be the equivalent of calling our backend API endpoint that we just tested, the /API/post. And it's going to send along the data that we just generated on the front end. So the front end is just generating arbitrary data from this random set of strings. And then by calling that backend endpoint that we defined and tested, that's the thing that on the backend itself has the connection to the database. So this is not for demo purposes. This is exactly how I would build a full stack application inside of SvelteKit where you define your API endpoints. You can keep your connection string private and maintained only on the back end. And then you call those API endpoints just like you would from any front end application. This is just all baked into the framework of SvelteKit.
Yeah, which is one of the great things about it.
Yep.
Awesome.
Yeah, great question, by the way. That is also, it's one of the great things. It's also one of the confusing things about these like hybrid frameworks because of
Yeah.
how powerful they are. But then it's like more responsibility for us as developers to understand what those powers come with.
I went ahead and hid
Hided.
our faces. I
Yes,
hided.
we are
Wow.
hided.
What was that? I hid our faces
We
so
are
we
hided
could see
forever.
more of this code. It's been a couple of days for me.
All
So,
good.
when I saved that too, it refreshed if anyone noticed that that
Mhm.
disappeared over there, so I just saved the file, and that's why it refreshed over there. So, are we able to just click this button and generate another one now?
Do one thing first.
Okay.
Just make that page bigger because I don't have like a
This one?
mobile design for it. Bigger in terms of wider. So like stretch it out.
Oh, yep. Okay.
Yeah. And what it may go all the way if you can. I don't remember how. I think it has like a hard coded width of like 600 or something that it needs.
Okay.
Anyway. So go ahead. Yeah. Now do the generate wand. So you
Oh.
can see it's doing like each piece by itself, and it's got
Oh,
this transition in and out, which took me a long time to play around with to figure
and
out.
it kind of, like, spun a little
Mhm.
bit.
Yeah, so if you go back to the code, and you could click generate over and over again, it's going to do the same thing. But if you look in the code and scroll down to the markup a little bit, well, yeah, show that first. That's a great
Yeah,
point.
so we have import fly from Svelte transition, which is the
Mhm.
only thing that we're importing animation-wise, it looks like.
Yep. And if you look at these, it's like conditionally displaying the different properties if they've been set. So like notice you didn't see anything on the screen. If you refresh the page, you won't see anything on the screen other than the buttons. So that's intentional. And what I do is if you scroll back up now to the TypeScript, it's a little hacky, but if you look at the handle generate, what we do is we go through 5 times and grab a random wood, and then we have a delay, and then we get rid of that wood value and then delay again. And the reason for that is we're able to basically show and hide that element 5 times in a row while that element is changing. And then in the markup, we define when an element is coming in, which means it wasn't showing and now it is, we're going to come up from the bottom. If you go down to one of those properties in the markup, so if you look at the wood, it's saying in when it's coming in, so it wasn't there and now it is. We want to fly in, and we want to fly in from 100 pixels below where it would be over the course of 50 milliseconds.
Yep,
The
so positive
Yeah.
numbers go down on the y-axis, and
Mhm.
then the duration is the time
Yep.
in milliseconds, right?
Exactly. So then your out would be the opposite. So this is how you get I actually searched for this and didn't find an answer to it, but this is how you get that like slot machine effect where you have it when it comes in, it's coming from the bottom up, and then from when it goes out, it's
So
going
it
from where
goes
it is up,
in, it's going from
from
the bottom
down to the
up,
middle. Yep.
and then it's coming out, it's gonna go up.
Hmm.
So you're
Yep.
getting that effect because it's kinda doing this crazy wish-washy thing.
Yes, exactly. So it kind of looks a little hacky, but the effect of this I think is
It's
really
really
cool,
cool.
especially when I add like styling and it actually looks like a real thing. So
I think you might actually be able to turn that into a, like, action and do because you have access to CSS transitions if you do an action, right? In Svelte.
yes, I know you can
I think so.
customize them. I just haven't done this myself.
Yeah,
So yeah, I would need, this is definitely something for me to look into because it may be a little easier than what I'm doing here.
awesome. That's a really cool effect. I love, like, I mean, even though you can't see the full thing
Hmm.
without it being, like, huge, you can
Yeah,
see that it's, like, that's so cool.
I like it. I was proud of that.
Yeah, that is awesome. And this is fully connected to our database. So can we see this data back in the database now that we've generated 4 wands, I think?
We haven't. So the thing we haven't done is we've generated the one just on the front end, but we haven't actually
Oh,
submitted to save one.
okay.
And I don't know, the submit probably works. Try to open up the console just to see the network tab, because I don't have any like feedback or anything in there to make it um, to let you know that it worked. But try the submit button there, and
Okay.
that gave it 200. So
And we
now.
got some data.
Mhm. So it should have been created successfully. You can see that there. And so what I'll do is like some sort of ability for people to like click generate up to 5 times or something and then save it. And I don't know how to save. I don't know if I want to let them add like their username or something. I'm not exactly sure. So I got to kind of figure out the details. But the core of it is there to be able
Yeah.
to see, to generate a wand, to be able to save it. The other thing I want to do, it's kind of this idea of the Jamstack popsicle thing. If you remember that demo, I want people to have like a URL that they can share with people to share their wand that they created. So that would be another endpoint inside of SvelteKit API endpoints to query a wand by
What did I do
um,
wrong there?
wand individual. So the name of
Oh,
the table is singular. But the last thing would be to make an endpoint to be able to query a wand based on like the ID of the wand.
and that way you could see like this stuff without going back into the database. I just wanted to see
Mhm.
what we had there. So this is
Yep.
the one we just created. We actually have this back in our Planetscale database using Prisma, which is
Mhm.
awesome. I
Yep.
mean, we have this nice front end code that we can, as JavaScript developers, whoops, not make a breakpoint, um, use to create this connection to the database and not have to worry about this syntax that I clearly messed up. And
Well, it's just and it's not you. It's just it's error prone in general. Like it's just hard to do right, which is why we like objects that can not have us worrying about the specific syntax or at least the SQL syntax.
we do. Awesome. Okay. I'm gonna put us back on the screen and I'm gonna go ahead and do the get init and we'll add this. I have the GH repo create. I have the GitHub CLI
Hmm.
to create.
That's what I
I'm
did for
actually going
mine
to
too.
name it Sirens stream so I can keep track of these and know what it's from.
Hmm.
And description's fine. Public and yes. And then we will add all of these changes and git commit. I'm just going to put a init in there and git push. I never remember this command either. I'm like
I don't
so
either.
bad about it. And I really wish that it would make the default branch main. And I don't know if that's VS Code. I don't know if it's SvelteKit. I don't know.
I can't
When you do
remember.
git init, it just does master.
Oh, it may be Git versus like I think if you create a new project in GitHub to start, I think the default branch is main,
Is
but
main now, yeah,
Git
but
locally is
locally if you
master.
do it.
Yeah.
So all of that is available on GitHub now. I'm Brittney Postma everywhere. So Brittney Postma at GitHub. And you should be able to see the one generator for siren streams. And I'll copy that over. And there's the code to that. And I think we are all set.
Cool.
This is awesome. Let you see that one more time. That is such a cool transition. And you're waiting for each one so that each one seems like it's coming in at like different times. So you're waiting longer.
Yeah, it actually is like for each one of the individual elements, I like do a for loop for one, then wait a for loop for the next one,
Okay,
and then
so it's
wait. Yeah.
because of the for loops. They have to
Hmm.
go through each one to do
Yep.
that. That makes sense. Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for coming. This was amazing seeing how we can connect a database to Prisma, to Planetscale, and get everything integrated together. Use our awesome JavaScript code to connect all of this and SvelteKit to make it nice and easy with pretty transitions. And you can even make it prettier if you wanted by like adding some styles in here. So we could like make our buttons some pretty color, like let's do
Turquoise.
white and then background color. Oh, I'm trying to do Sirens colors. So like
Oh, nice. Yeah,
teal.
great idea.
Why didn't it do that?
Are we
Oh,
still running? I think
I
we killed
killed
it.
my
Yeah.
server. There we go. Not prettier yet, but you see the gist of it. So these are scoped by default, so you can throw your code in there, style it however you want, get something fun up and running, and that's it. It's that easy. Like James was saying earlier, it's like just this is how you actually do it in a production code. It's that
Yep.
easy.
Yeah, I'm glad there was the question of like, is this just for demo purposes? And I can be like, no, this is
No,
a real thing.
this is really how you do it. Yeah. Thanks everyone for coming, and we will see y'all next time. Bye.